So, welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Joelle, and we'll just give it a few minutes here for people to receive the notification. We are going to be here for a beautiful conversation this evening, and so I want to make sure that all of the stakeholders and interested folks are able to join. So, we'll just go ahead and send out a few links here. And I'll allow us to see the beautiful nature as Sandy is treating us to a little bit of outdoor vibrations. Thank you. And we'll be starting here
Absolutely.
shortly.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Sandy, this is going to be interesting. As you know, we have these wonderful exchanges of information whenever we connect, and the seeds of this conversation have been percolating beneath the soil, waiting to emerge. So, everyone, we are here for a conversation about family mapping. And Sandy, you are a wonderful facilitator of this process. This will be our third conversation that we've had here in this space about the family mapping work that we are doing and that I'm getting to do with and through you. So, Sandy, welcome, welcome, welcome. Oh, I think we've got you on mute.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, now I can.
All right. It is always an honor to be here with you all, talking on the things that bring so much joy to my heart. I'm grateful that we're here back again. I am walking in nature right now. I find that I think clearer and the energy does flow through me a lot easier when I'm speaking. So I thank you all for walking with me today.
Yes, it is wonderful. So, and when we talk about, just by way of background, for those who might be new to the conversation today, would you share a little bit about the family mapping process that you are facilitating?
Absolutely. So this process started with me a little over 4.5 years ago, where I was taught by my spiritual father and mentor, Dr. Mark Armstrong, who had an opportunity to learn from Vasama Zulu Credo Mutwa the essence of what family constellation is. And after I was trained with him, I realized that this entire process goes hand in hand with all of the work that I've been doing over the last few years. And that is learning what the connectivity is between the birth family, who you were birthed in, with relation to how your life unfolds. And as I began to study that and then study other modalities based upon maybe traumatic experiences that an individual may have had or something similar to that, I began to realize that this is a necessity for us to be able to delve deeper into to help those. So, family mapping constellation is the term that I've coined it to be because I realize it's truly a map. And when we understand the road that we have come from, the road that we are traveling, we can better understand where we're going. So that is how we help families, individuals move through understanding why they were birthed in the family that they were birthed in and how to heal anything that before now was believed to be impossible, maybe because an individual has transitioned on and there's nothing to do about it. We found that that is in fact not true.
You know, it's so interesting because I've gone through several family map processes with you now, and it's always very surprising because we believe that secrets go with us to the grave. Like, we're going to focus in a little bit tonight in a very specific area of family reconciliation, and that is around the topics of secrecy and what happens when there. I mean, we've got lots of examples that we can put forward. And what I want to do first here is share a clip that you sent to me this week. And it's going to get our conversation going here. So let's see here.
And a greater understanding because of it, and to heal from it. That is the greatest gift they've given you.
Let me try it again here.
The greatest gift of your life is your parents' dysfunction. For you to be aware of it, to have forgiveness for it, compassion for it, and a greater understanding because of it, and to heal from it. That is the greatest gift they've given you.
Okay, so when you saw that and decided to share it, where were you in reaction?
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Joelle. When I heard that, the misconception is that most people believe that their parents gave them, especially if you were birthed in a family that you had some trauma from it, we like to disown those that we came from, especially through trauma. However, when we start looking at the patterns of behavior, we truly realize without pain, without struggle, without an ability to move through things that we don't have an understanding about, we cannot truly grow in the deepest of ways. So what we what we usually look at as, you know, something bad, we're discovering now that it's not necessarily a bad thing. It is truly the biggest gift that we could possibly receive, to be able to grow beyond this regular, everyday, in and out routine. It offers us an opportunity to not only heal backwards, but forward. If we choose to have children or if we choose not to, we still are offered that opportunity in the highest form of forgiveness. Can I move through what I have before now thought was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and then see the greatest gift that's been given me? So that's kind of like what I was thinking about when I saw that video.
Well, it's so interesting because, like, in the therapy models that we see poke fun of on TV and stuff like that, it's like, oh, of course, everything's your mother's fault, right? There's this jokiness about it, but it's partly to kind of like ease the sting of, like real things. And I mean, it gets very complicated when we look at blaming and pointing fingers, right? And so, like, dysfunction reflects dysfunction until someone decides to not reflect it, right? So when we have alcoholism, the child who still is going to have some dysfunction because they grew up with a dysfunctional parent, whether it was seen on the surface or not, right? The energy was present of substance addiction, right? So that child then grows up and will not touch any substances. So the pattern of that dysfunction through addiction is changed going forward. But the other things that might have caused the response of trying to self medicate with alcohol that led to alcoholism can still be going on in the family pattern, even though one piece of it has been seemingly resolved, because it's
That.
like
Mhm.
the root of that idea of dysfunction is a wound or an added maladaptation that has not been healthy. Right.
Yes, absolutely. That is, it has been proven that energy flows, and it never stops. It continues to flow. And with that example that you've just made, it shows how energy continues to flow and never dies. And it
Right.
offers us that opportunity to look deeper beyond the pain, whatever that is, whatever that perception is. Because remember, my perception of a pain point can be completely different from your perception of a pain point, and we can be experiencing the same exact thing. So, looking at it from that perspective, how can I look at this pain point a little different to be able to pull from it something that, that image that you see of the eclipse out in the ocean? You see the tip of it. You see
Mm-hmm.
the tip of it, but you don't see that's underneath it. It's
Mm-hmm.
usually 50 times deeper under the water than that perception that you see above the water.
Right.
So this is the same analogy, when we can move through the perception of the trauma or the pain or the discomfort or even the any addiction, right, that has been passed, when we can see beyond that. But how do we see beyond that? We have to sometimes have help. Sometimes we have to have help. And that help comes, a lot of times from just an idea that if I looked at this from another perspective, can I get a different outcome? That's all that you need. Just
Mm.
a small inkling of that. But
Okay.
you are so correct.
That small inkling, right? Okay. This is a perfect segue to this next clip that I want to share. All right. So, what do you say that one sliver of a shift of perspective changes the entire narrative of what was functional, what wasn't functional, what was possible, what wasn't possible. In family mapping, we're dealing with like radical shifts of things that is so far fetched that you would say, how in the world? What is that? What would that be like? So, this particular clip is one that is quite interesting. So, here we go. Let me see if I have to start it
That
over again.
my mother
Oh, here
was
we go.
to
Okay.
set up for me a meeting for me to go in and view my notes at Islington. So I was given a date and a time and an address, and that's what I did. I turned up supposing that I was going to read some very interesting things about myself and my family, only to find that it was really quite different.
So can you just tell us what exactly it said in the notes?
So in the notes at the top, it started off that my mother was only 16, which didn't surprise me. In those days, a lot of very young mothers were, leaned on to get their children adopted, or it was circumstances they couldn't bring them up on their own. But as I read down further, it listed the father, who was listed as her brother, who was only 14 at the time.
So you're sitting in a room on your own in a council building, reading through all of this. It must be a moment that you have relived many times. I almost don't want to ask you to relive it again for us, but that's exactly what I'm doing. What did you feel?
To begin with, I had to go back and read it again because I thought I must have made a mistake. And then I just began to feel really quite sick, to be honest. I had been brought up in a Catholic family, gone to Catholic schools, and people didn't even have sex before marriage. Incest was a real, it was off the scale in terms of what was acceptable. And so to start with, I just kept reading and rereading, shock, revulsion, and then utter shame. And the thought then that I could never ever tell my parents about this. In fact, I wasn't sure I could tell anybody about this because people would think differently of me if they knew where I had come from, was what I thought. So in my head, this was just the end of everything as I knew it.
Mm.
All right. So that, okay, let's talk about so a secret that is hidden. Some people have things that are hidden due to adoption, but a lot of people have more secrets than what they realize if you go back a few generations, right? Not even a few, a hop, skip, and a jump away. A lot of us are that close to some family secret that was either known by a few who kept the silence, or in this case, was kept in a record that was traceable and discoverable by this person. And as we know now, DNA results are revealing secrets of biology left and right. So, what are your thoughts as you consider this picture in family mapping where an adopted person who had a been replacement, mother, father, figurehead, but then finds out this thing about their biological mother, father, and this was later in her life. She was probably in her 30s or 40s, and her mother was still living. Oh no, this lady, in this lady's case, she had an opportunity. The birth, her biological mother decided to meet her. And when she went to meet this lady, there was a man there. He never introduced himself, but she's sure that it was the brother and that it was her father. And she pretty much went ballistic on them at that point. And they said, well, you know what? You can go home and compose yourself and we'll meet you again. And when she called the number back, it had been disconnected and they disappeared. So now she's, you saw her age. So it's like she'll never know any more than that one passing vent that she had under these terrible circumstances to speak to the beings who made her. It was a lot.
It is a lot, and she is actually a famous author as
Yes.
well. That's telling her story. So it shares with you that no one is immune to, family secrets, and it's never it's never a surprise to me that things like this will eventually come out. As my parents used to say, what's done in the dark will eventually come to the light. And so in this example, this was an extreme example of someone doing a little research just out of curiosity of why mother would have and do certain things. And this is also a wonderful example of what we just finished looking at previous to this, the video clip that you showed. It's the biggest pain, it's the deepest pain, but it's also the most freeing thing that an individual can do in their life.
Well, and she later went through a process where I think it took her another decade before she started finally kind of like bursting at the seams. Maybe it was 20 years before she finally started opening up to trust that she was not going to be judged and ostracized by the people who knew and loved her, treating her differently because of the awareness of what her parents problematic thing, right? Like that was her biggest
Right.
fear to her heart was of what are people going to say about me or think about me and my mental competence? Am I defective? And then of course her decision to never ever ever have children, like the ramifications of that reaction.
Right. Right. I don't know if you had an opportunity to hear the words that I was sharing. Lastly, um, with reference to this is a wonderful example. Um, All right. I'm sorry. Are you able to hear me there,
Yes.
Joelle? Okay.
Uh-huh.
This is a wonderful example of that clip that we just experienced, with it being one of the most difficult things of her life, discovering and also having an opportunity to understand and appreciate. It catapulted her into deeper understanding of why, as you just pointed out, she was treated a certain way. Why, when we understand why, a lot of times, most times, then we can make sense and pull the pieces together and map together on why and who we are, right?
Mm.
So this was a very powerful story that I came across, and I said, "Oh my God, this is a wonderful example for us to know." And when we understand why we were treated, why we experienced, why certain pieces in our lives were like, why did my mother, she talked about, why did my mother wear gloves? Why did she
Oh,
not like to get
that's coming up
in
next.
the sun?
I've got that one coming up next. That's the second.
Oh,
That one.
okay, okay.
Yeah, this clip is coming up. The first one was finding out about your dubious parentage, right? Now, this one is going to be finding about your race. So I'm going to go ahead and cue that one up now.
At first, I couldn't find him.
Okay.
Decided to search for his identity, combing through microfilm.
At first, I couldn't find him. Then I put in the 1900 Louisiana census records, and suddenly I see the name Azima Frederick. There are all these Fredericks in the same household. Then I noticed something else very curious. Next to all their names is the letter B. So I go to the head of that column to see what it stands for, and it says race. So I thought, B? Does that mean black?
Gail wanted to confront her mother, but first she reached out to the state of Louisiana, requesting her mother's birth certificate.
I pretended I was my mother and that I'd lost my birth certificate. I opened that birth certificate, and there in parentheses were 3 letters, COL. So I wrote to the state again and said, my birth certificate said COL. Would you please explain to me what that means? They sent me a very official letter back, and they said, COL is for colored. I just was speechless. I didn't know if my mother knew, but I'm thinking, how could she not know this? And why has she never said anything to me?
We're joined now by Gail Lucas.
Oh, that's the second clip, right? So they
Yeah.
find out some mysteries. Like the first lady, she didn't have any mystery. She was adopted just thinking she had a teenage mother. Went and signed a registry, and they said, oh, here's your record. And then she finds out there's a situation. This one, her mom is still alive, was keeping secrets that she found out. She wrote a book about it called White Like Me. And basically, she goes through this journey of connecting then with the rest of her family that had been kept hidden from her by her mother. And her mother refused to say a word ever for like 30 more years. She never said anything and made her promise that she wouldn't say anything, I think, until after she was dead. And so,
That's
like,
it.
the idea that it was to her such a thing that needed to be hidden so continuously, to have lived to have to cover yourself so as to not get too much, like, what did that do to her frequency and her experience of a mother and a wife and friend, to have that suppressive fear going on?
Right. It's almost like, Joelle, you're living a life thinking one thing, and you build your life around this one thought, and yet the basis of that thought, you find out much later in life, is not the thing that you thought. So am I now a lie? Like
Well,
everything that I've ever thought and represented, you know what I mean?
well, that's what the lady in this clip is saying also. She's like, well, I identify as white. Like I'm not culturally black. You know what I'm saying? Like my entire existence I have to own. And that's not to take anything away from my blackness, but you know what I'm saying? She was raised different because of that. Her mother ensured that there was no hint of anything that was not waspy American in her behavior and how she
Think
manifests.
about this. Yeah, think about this. Think about this piece right here, Joelle. What pain could the mother have experienced? What pain could she have experienced that would have continued from some earlier moment in time from somebody else? You know, this is what we were talking about previously in the previous clip when we were listening to the gentleman share, you know, how the most painful thing that we can perceive that we came from our parents, it can be the most beautiful lesson for us in life, can be the blessing. Just imagine most times in scenarios and situations like this, we look at the person who we discover, say our parent, shared something with us that wasn't true. However, in family mapping, what happens is we get the story behind the story. It comes up because everyone wants to be vindicated, living or not.
Right, right,
And so we get to see what is that story behind the stories that we're listening to now. What is that story? And then inside of that is where we gain understanding and then a compassion for what we previously thought was the worst lie or the worst traumatic experience of our lives.
right. Well,
Yeah.
and that if we look back far enough, which is not far at all, we can find instances in our oral narratives where someone likely had to abandon family to survive. By that, I mean for people who were fair enough complected to pass into white society was a matter of freedom or lack thereof, right? So if you had to never admit your connection to your family for the rest of your lived life under fear of repercussion, or like the Jewish people in the Holocaust who could not give they tried to hide every evidence of their bloodline in order to survive. There's certain big narratives that we can all understand through an experience that we've read or epigenetically manifested in our own family, experience. And epigenetics is the manifestation in biology of the experiences of the ancestors. So trauma, famine, hardship, upheaval, all those things pass down prints into our biology and behavior. So certainly if you've had to cut off your family and never be connected with them again in order to live, the grandchild of a person who's had to be silent about who they were, who never knows, it disappears into the mist of time once that person is dead. The connection to is chopped, which is what they intended for it to happen anyway, but energetically it will present over and over again, whether verbalized or understood. I hope that made sense. I don't know if we've lost Sandy. There you are.
Yes, 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 yes. That makes perfect sense, you know. And with us being willing, you know, that's the biggest thing, Joelle. with us being willing. And, how do you get to that phase of being willing? Through the
Well,
hurt, the
right,
deep hurt. How do you
right.
get so one of the things that hadn't been talked about, which we see a lot of the stories, but that piece that it takes for us to get to say, you know what, I'm ready. How do we get to that phase when we discover, or even when we know, and something's eating away at us? How do we get to that point to say, okay, because that's what we're doing here, Joelle. We're attempting
Right.
to give people the information and say, listen, you don't have to live with the hurt anymore. You don't have to be the one to keep carrying the family secret to the next generation. Because believe me, it gains momentum, and it gains like that silence. It's like a ball, like a snowball,
Hmm.
you
Yeah,
know?
and the idea is that secrets are okay then. Everybody thinks there's a justification for the secret, but when we're ready, that is what I feel like these women clearly at their lives, even though they got more than what they bargained for, their guidance led them to ask these questions in that
Yes,
moment. So at a
yes.
higher level, there was an awareness that they were going to be resilient enough to deal with whatever it turned out to be that came up in their story. And although it was radically life altering for both of them, they called the experience unto themselves, like
That
their
is so
choice.
beautiful.
Their
Yeah,
choice, right? They
yeah.
chose to pursue an inquiry. So all of us kind of have questions. And when presented with an opportunity, we just all we have to do is do one little thing and know that we're not going to be presented with something that, although it might be life altering, it won't be in isolation, for one, because you've got a container, you've got a group, you've got a facilitated structure that includes care during and after the mapping revelations, if you will. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
Because it's
yes.
not like you just pop in and all of a sudden discover these things and now you're off bye bye into the world. Good luck managing the fact that you just dropped a bomb. It's not that
Right.
kind of experience. It's not made for TV drama effect. But it can be quite intense
Right.
when those secrets do begin to come forward.
That's so perfectly said, Joelle. And one of the things I'd like for everyone to realize, we're talking about the discovering of secrets, the unveiling of secrets, how to move through secrets. If you could speak to any of these individuals who've had an opportunity to move through, whether it's in the family mapping or some other avenue of discovery, when you see them now, it's like they wouldn't trade the world for being able to move through. Nobody said it's going to be easy. Nobody said that it's going to be a walk in the park. But I
Right.
tell you, this is stored energy. And a secret is your vital life force energy. And when that is released to you, you become something powerful because it's rightfully yours. It's your rightful inheritance, no matter what it looks like. And it can
Well,
change your life.
one thing that I do want to touch on that's a special topic before we head to the home stretch is that there are a lot of secrets and shame around children born in families, either especially out of wedlock children for a period of time. If you did not have quote unquote marriage papers, then there was a very strong reaction in most cases prior to this last couple generations where
Yes,
you were
ma'am.
shipped away, where it was kept as secret as possible. There was a personal failing, even of a, young parent. It was a personal moral failure if they were in a position of having a baby. And so much secrecy. And also for the children that were miscarried, that were never able to be carried to term, people just didn't talk about that because it could be seen as you being a failure as a mother, or having something wrong with you. Why can't you do this? Like, why have you lost 7 or 8 babies and you just don't tell anybody anymore, right? Those secrets of that nature are so hard, because that's where the hidden parentage also comes in, because that's where we find out that sometimes the children are from family members and there's been inappropriate, and nobody ever dug deep enough to realize that this child was being abused, rather than just judging them, so like those are real and present for my generation of people who are in their 50s, whose parents were very much, our parents were very much like, the worst thing you could do would be to be a high
Right.
school and come up pregnant, in
Right.
certain religious sects, especially.
Thank you for bringing that up, Joelle, because I was watching another video where there was a study done specifically talking about how the mother feels during pregnancy. That DNA is transferred to the baby. So if you have a question about why do you have a sensitivity to shame, most times you discover that because that's what your mother was experiencing during the gestational period of you. If you have a feeling of not being wanted, all of that DNA genetically is being transferred to the baby. So it creates, I like to say a lot of times, it creates the space, it creates the environment when you become an adult, when you start interacting with other individuals. You understand that it's important to develop relationships. It's no coincidence that that duplication of energy, that duplication of how you have relationships, is specifically related to the type of relationships that your mother had during gestation. So, you know, it's really something to talk about, and to, you know, be ready and willing, if to, in a safe environment, to walk through and deal with those things and overcome them. It's not
Mhm.
inevitable. It's not something that cannot be done or undone or what have you. A lot of times it's a simple acknowledging how you feel, even in those moments and times that you don't want to share your feelings with someone, but you just have this little inkling that there is something different, there is something gnawing at me, there is just something.
Mhm. That won't let you find that, that inner call to say there's got to be an answer to something. Maybe I don't know exactly the question to ask. That's the other thing about like coming to a family mapping, to, just even resonate with it, to show up, is a person who is aware and willing to step into a family focused view. Now, face it, a lot of us may not be ready at different times in our lives to do work in that way. It might just be what it is right now, right? And that's okay too. But it does provide a way, without the presence of the people physically, like it's not like a group intervention. So there is a safety kind of in that, especially if you're wanting to. It's like being in the therapist's office. The things that are talked about don't leave the circle. So it's a safe space for you to really process and get into the nitty gritty in a meaningful way instead of a salacious or, and it's a judgment free zone as well, to support your own judgment free processing of what you find out about your map. You know,
Yes, we're here to support you, like Joelle said, judgment free, because we know that, the value of supporting you outweighs the value of judging you. Joelle and I, we are in this whole process to assist as many people as we possibly can, because a lot of times nobody talk about this. you know it's a secret and it stays a secret.
right.
And we're here to really facilitate that transitioning perspective of who you think you are, or who you've been made to believe that you are.
Right.
And so through this process, as Joelle said, there's no judgment, because we know, those who are here to support you, we know that this is only an aspect of who you are. It
Right.
doesn't define your whole persona. It's only an aspect.
And what did you say at the beginning? Of something by which you will grow and expand. I think we got a little glitch there, but that absolutely is in alignment with the call to explore deeper levels of self and the way that we're showing up and the way that we're choosing to show up and to process how we've been. There you are, you're back.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Beautiful. Yes, you were saying, repeating what we were saying at the beginning.
Well, yeah, you were. It tied in perfectly to the fact that it's only going to grow and expand you. So we are having our next family mapping workshop. Let me see if I can make myself bigger here. And
That's
we'll
it,
put the
y'all.
link. We'll put the link to this in the show notes in the description. This is going to be on Sunday, September 29th. It's a 10 to 4 workshop. It includes lunch. We've got spaces available. It does book up. And so we have 12 facilitated positions available for this. So please, if you are led to, and if not, that is fine too, because we know that there will be a shift from the things that we even talked about in this conversation. And coming up after Labor Day, we are going to continue our family mapping conversations, and we are going to explore the kingdom of Wakanda through the lens of family mapping. So all of you Black Panther fans and Wakandans, get ready, because we're going to take ripped from popular cinema and look at family mapping and what it's going to show us as yet to be determined. So I'm excited for that, Sandy. I'm waiting for the lag. I can see you moving. There you are.
Beautiful.
So, Sandy, I will see you online in a couple weeks after
Yes,
Labor Day,
yes.
and we
Yes,
will be
ma'am.
taking your registrations. And if you have any questions, please leave it in the comments. And I will also put links to the full video so you can watch these full interviews. They were quite fascinating as well. So, Sandy, thank you so much for being here this evening. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your stroll.
Right. There we go. Thank you so much, Joelle, for allowing me to be and in your presence and sharing what we both hold so dear to our heart. Thank you all so much for being outdoors with me today. It's rejuvenating. It's a wonderful, beautiful day in the Atlanta area. I'm grateful for that. And I look forward to seeing you all in one of our family mappings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Namaste, Sandy.
Namaste. Peace and love.